Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, September the 28th, 2023. A couple of days ago, I talked about Canada with reference to the Canadian Parliament giving a standing ovation to an SS veteran. And what I want to do today is look again at Canada, but this time I want to look at the horoscope of Canada, the moment Canada came into being. And I think most astrologers take that time as being midnight on July the 1st, 1867. That's when Canada became a dominion, and it was starting to separate from Britain. So I want to look at that chart, and I want to do some comparisons. I want to compare Canada's chart with, well, the chart for when the Canadian Parliament gave that standing ovation to an SS veteran. I also want to compare the Canadian chart to that of Justin Trudeau. I want to compare it with the chart of Ukraine, chart of England, and I also want to compare it with the chart of Stepan Bandera, the Ukrainian anti-Semitic nationalist who is incredibly popular in Ukraine at the moment. So I want to do a few comparisons there. But before I do all that, I want to look at the astrology for today, and I also want to do the I Ching for today. So let's look at today's astrology. Today being Thursday, September the 28th, 2023. Now, I'm not saying that the astrology for today is particularly dramatic. So here's a chart for noon, set for New York, midday. As I said, it doesn't have to be set for New York. I just did it as a matter of convenience. So if we look at the moon, and when we look at these charts, the moon is the most important planet. I know it's a satellite, but astrologers call it a planet. The moon is the most important planet when looking at daily charts, because it's the only thing that really moves a substantial distance in 24 hours. So we can see that the moon is in Pisces, remains in Pisces. It's opposition Mercury, and it's conjunct Neptune, and it is sextile Pluto. So what this all means is that the moon in Pisces opposition Mercury in Virgo. Now, two completely different energies. The moon and Mercury are both the communication planets. The moon is about emotional communication. Mercury is about more sort of mental, verbal communication. And they are opposition each other. So when you've got moon opposition Mercury, you've got communication problems. Some of us are trying to be logical and to get the words out, but other people are just creating confusion, creating emotional blocks, emotional blind alleys. And so we have to be very careful what we say, because there's plenty of scope for being misunderstood. There's also plenty of scope for getting the wrong impression. Mercury is that thing in our head, or represents that thing in our head, which is trying to make sense of the world, which is trying to process it all. And if Mercury is opposition this moon in Pisces, there can be just lots of confusion. We can get flooded with the wrong signals and the wrong ideas, and we might reach the wrong conclusions. And matters aren't helped by the fact that the moon is making a conjunction to Neptune. Neptune is the ultimate planet of confusion. So when you've got the moon opposition Mercury conjunct Neptune, just plenty of scope for misunderstanding. So in many respects, I would advise just not really to make decisions today. Um, you know, Also, you have to bear in mind that the moon, having made that opposition to Mercury, that is its last major aspect to a traditional planet. Yes, I understand moon makes a sextile to Pluto, but Pluto is not a traditional planet. In other words, the moon is void of course. It's going nowhere. So it's not a good idea to make decisions unless perhaps you are in the US and it is, the Americas in general, Canada, including Canada, and it is the evening, because London time, the moon goes into Aries tomorrow on Friday at 1:17 a.m. So New York time, that's 8:17 tonight. So tonight, 8:17 p.m., the moon goes into Aries. The moon is no longer void. The moon is no longer in Pisces. And so that might make it easier to make decisions. But even then, we have to be careful because, the moon is then making an opposition to the sun. Because don't forget, tomorrow's a full moon. And the full moon can create its own problems. So overall, I would just keep it low profile, yet avoid making decisions. If anyone tells you something, particularly of a financial nature, don't necessarily believe them. And even if you check the facts for yourself, you might check the facts wrong. So it's that kind of day. But I don't want to over dramatize it. It's not. I don't think it's a disastrous day. If we keep ourselves to ourselves, we don't make decisions. We just soak it all up. Should be absolutely fine. So I now want to do my forecast for the 12 signs. And so when you hear my forecast for the 12 signs, you will see that I'm very influenced by that conjunction between the moon and Neptune. So here they are. Here are my forecasts for the 12 signs for Thursday, September the 28th, 2023. Aries, you're not quite your normal self today. You find yourself getting confused by things that are relatively straightforward. And even when the answer is obvious, you could jump the wrong way. On the other hand, your dreams, both waking and sleeping, are going to be vivid, and in some chaotic way, they'll point to the future. Taurus, at some level, you don't seem to know what you want. And that might make you vulnerable because you're not able to clearly define yourself and your aims, and you might be tempted to just follow the crowd. Talking about crowds, you'll meet some interesting people today, but can you trust them? Gemini, your sense of direction is muddled. You may want to go in one direction, but end up going somewhere completely different. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes things work out for the best, and the surprise destination you arrive at may be an integral and beneficial part of your destiny. At work, there might be some people being economical with the truth. Cancer. Cancerians tend to be quite sensitive, and today your sensitivities will be on peak form. Further, you'll be in touch with higher level forces of a collective and spiritual nature. In one sense, this is a good thing, but you'll have a sense of meaning and oneness. However, there is a danger that you get overwhelmed by competing signals. Leo, nothing is particularly simple, and the more you try to focus on one thing, the more you lose out on the big picture. Instead, you have to live with complexity and accept that nothing is quite as it seems. And that means not reaching conclusions and having an open mind. Then the situation will clarify at a time of its own choosing. Virgo. You can't make plans without considering how other people are going to respond, and other people's responses are likely to be unpredictable. You might have your expectations, but sudden displays of stubbornness can spoil everything. If you want relationships to get stronger, then you must be ready to up the emotional content. Libra. Reliability seems to be an issue. Although you know that it's important to keep your word and to stick to a schedule, it can be difficult. Circumstances that apparently are beyond your control can manifest out of the blue, and your sudden changes of plan can actually undermine your reputation. I suppose then it's important not to make promises unless you're very sure that you can keep them. Scorpio. You're in the mood for playing games, the Scorpio games, where no one is quite sure what you mean or what you intend, but there's a limit to how far you can push things. If you overstep people's boundaries or mess with their cognitive balance, there could be a problem. So there comes a time when you have to be very straightforward. Sagittarius. Things aren't as stable as they seem, and it doesn't take much to lose your footing. You therefore need to have your eyes open all day long. And you also have to watch out for things connected with water. It's difficult to keep water in one place, and you have to watch out for spills and leaks. Capricorn. Just because you don't tell the truth doesn't mean that you're telling lies. You're just creating a constructed narrative with elements of the truth which puts your own interests in the best possible light. Looking at relationships, partners find it difficult to be honest and upfront, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're hiding anything. Aquarius. Your understanding of financial realities may be tenuous, at least for today, so it's probably a bad idea to make financial decisions. And if you're given some financial information, don't jump to conclusions. It's possible that somewhere along the line, someone has made a mistake or a miscalculation. Pisces. Where is the fog coming from? It's easy to blame other people for the confusion, but the ultimate source of the confusion may be you yourself. At an unconscious level, you're giving confusing signals, and the things you say could be interpreted in several different ways. So, when explaining yourself, be very careful with your choice of words. So, I now want to move to the I Ching. And so, as always, I threw 3 coins in the air and I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for people watching this video? So the first and only hexagram I got was hexagram 20, which is contemplation. I mean, if you look at this, at the hexagram, you can see that it's solid. It's you've got 2 beams at the top. It's just solid and it just sits there. And I think this hexagram, the fact that it's locked, actually fits in with what I've just talked about in terms of astrology. In terms of the astrology, I was suggesting with this moon conjunct Neptune, it probably isn't the time to be doing anything or making decisions. And likewise, with this hexagram 20, it's about contemplation. It's about not doing anything. The I Ching sees this as the moment before action. It's that moment when, we've done a lot of preparation, but we're not quite ready. And there's that moment of silence. It's that moment of silence. I don't know. It's like, I remember once I was in London and I spent, was it New Year on my own? No, or Christmas on, no, I think it was New Year on your own. When you're alone, when you decide to spend a big holiday like New Year or Christmas Day on on your own, you feel this great silence. It's just a moment of absolute quietness. Or certainly Christmas Day, I don't know if you've spent Christmas Day in England is completely dead, absolutely dead. Only the pubs and the churches are open. So there's no transport, nothing. Everything is closed. And I did once spend Christmas Day on my own. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. This amazing silence, and so this is 20 contemplation. It's that moment of silence before the action takes place, and when you've got a locked hexagram like this, when it doesn't move. It's worth looking at something called the ruling lines. Normally you don't really look at lines unless they're highlighted, but these two lines are clearly the lines that matter. And this line is about contemplating yourself and considering perhaps mistakes you've made. And that's one thing we have to do. And this line here, the top line, is about not just moving beyond ourselves, moving beyond our mistakes, just contemplating our relevance to the whole universe and how it all fits together. Now, it is worth looking at the nuclear hexagram. The nuclear hexagram is to find the nuclear hexagram. You remove the top and the bottom lines, and then you look at giving you only four lines in the middle, and then you look at the top three of the four, and then the bottom three of the four, and so you will see that the nuclear hexagram is actually this, which we had quite recently, splitting apart. Now, this is not a very good hexagram, but this is not relevant to what it's not that today is a splitting apart day. It provides background. Because it is a nuclear hexagram splitting apart. So what does that mean, having splitting apart as a nuclear hexagram? I think it's about the context in which we are contemplating. So the context is, I think for many of us, we may feel that we have recently had a sort of a big fracture. We've had to break off from something. We've had to flee somewhere. We've had to, deal with the fact that maybe in a metaphorical sense, the powers of evil were just all over the place, or we were dealing with people who were no good, situations that were no good. And we may feel that recently we've got away from this, and we're trying to contemplate this. So we've got away from one thing, but we haven't moved to the next. And that's perhaps what contemplation is about. And so today is about that contemplation. There's certainly no need to do anything. Don't make financial decisions. Don't make commitments. Just let it all sink in. So that's what I would say about the I Ching. It's not a bad. Certainly not a bad hexagram. It's not exciting. I think it's just giving us some simple advice about how best to deal with the day's challenges. So what I want to do now is go back to the astrology and talk about Canada. Canada. Okay, so let's we'll start off by looking at Canada's horoscope. So here's Canada, July the 1st, 1867, midnight. When Canada started to separate from Britain. First thing that grabs me about the chart is that you've got Neptune rising. You see that you've got Aries rising, Neptune on the ascendant. My impression of Canada, speaking as someone who's never been there, that the sort of, Canada is supposed to be solid and not as coarse and brash and as the United States. you know, less violence, you know, but I don't really know. But Neptune on the ascendant in Aries suggests that this country at some level has a capacity for being utterly confused. And it's Neptune in Aries. Neptune is about sort of piling into something without really thinking about it. And maybe piling into something maybe as a result of external pressure, being vulnerable perhaps to external pressure. I suppose if you think about Canada, you know, for example, being dragged into the First World War by its former colonial masters, Britain, you know, with all the casualties there, getting involved in the Second World War. So there's a lot of wars that Canada has kind of got involved with, but that might be the sort of Neptune in Aries. Got a Sun Uranus conjunction, exact Sun Uranus conjunction in Cancer. There is something surprising about that, isn't there? A capacity for surprises, and it's in Cancer, the sign of the sign of one's roots. And I suppose you know, the Canadian Parliament's applause of a SS veteran was certainly surprising. The sensible aspect of Canada, you know, as I said, I thought Canadians were sort of very sensible people, very down to earth. There's sort of Mars in Virgo. Mars in Virgo in the sixth house. I mean, isn't that what it's about? You know, just focusing on what you need to focus on, and not indulging in flights of fantasy. Well, yeah, but you have to indulge in flights of fantasy because there's Neptune on the ascendant. But I don't want to really dwell too much on this chart on its own, because this chart on its own, for me, doesn't make a great deal of sense. Not least because I've never been to Canada. I suppose one can't help noticing that Canada has a Saturn-Pluto opposition. Saturn-Pluto opposition is about there is the potential for extremity there with a Saturn-Pluto opposition, really pushing something very far. And maybe as Canada matures as a country, you know, 1867, it's getting older as a country, maybe more and more stuff in this horoscope is going to start to manifest. Now, as far as Canada's origins are concerned, Canada obviously was a British colony. And so we can see the link between Canada and Britain by comparing Canada with England's 1066 chart. So this is a chart for England, coronation of William I, which took place on Christmas Day 1066, and the tradition is that it took place at noon. So you can see that at noon, the IC, the lowest point in the chart, was at 842 Cancer, and the highest point was 842 Capricorn, and you've got Sun at 9 Capricorn. So if you compare the two charts, you can see that Canada's midheaven and Britain's midheaven are exactly the same. And you know, the Sun, Canada's Sun, 851 Cancer, is opposition England's Sun at 955 Capricorn. So but the very fact that they've both got the same midheaven, the 1066 chart for England, the 1867 chart for Canada, that I suppose suggests that common heritage. Now, as far as other charts are concerned, I was quite interested when I was looking at Anthony Rota's horoscope. I don't have Anthony Rota's time of birth, so he was a former Speaker of the Canadian Parliament who had to resign after the SS veteran gaffe. As I said, I don't have his time of birth, but that's a secondary progressions for Anthony Rota. Sorry. So Anthony Rota's chart. Anthony Rota has his Venus at 15 Aries. So, it's very fortunate sometimes if you want to go into politics. If you've got a position in your chart something in your chart that links up with your country's chart, it's like George Bush Jr. was born on July the 6th, 1946. So he was born only 2 days after July the 4th. So having his son so close to America's son must have made it easier for him to get elected as president in 2000. With the Speaker, his Venus at 15 Aries, and so if you go back to the Canada chart, Anthony Rota had his Venus on Canada's ascendant, 16 Aries, and on its Neptune. So something about his Venus, the way he presented himself, allowed him to get to this very senior position. Though you could also say that his Venus confused Canada and sort of brought out the way the relationships. His Venus is about the relationships he's forming, I suppose, with his constituents. And so Venus, he thought, it'd be a nice idea to bring this SS veteran to Parliament, not knowing that he was an SS veteran. So there's his Venus working in his constituency, but then it hits Canada's Neptune. And so that applause, the complete, I think the complete idiocy of the Canadian Parliament in every single one of them applauding, giving a standing ovation to an SS veteran, I think is actually reflected by that Neptune on the ascendant. It was a supreme act of stupidity, which I think was kind of shown in the Canada horoscope. Now, as far as Justin Trudeau is concerned, here is, we've looked at Justin Trudeau's chart. We've looked at Justin Trudeau's chart before. So Justin Trudeau has a Moon-Uranus opposition at 17 Aries to 17 Libra. So, you think that, okay, he's a Capricorn, Justin Trudeau, but, that Moon in Aries opposition Uranus is someone who can cause real chaos. So if we look at Justin Trudeau and Canada, so in the middle we've got Canada's chart. On the outer wheel we've got Justin Trudeau's chart. So you can see Justin Trudeau has got his moon on Canada's ascendant and on its Neptune. And, the moon is a planet that's really important in politics. The moon is the public. It's how you relate to the people around you. And, the public, not just the people around you, but, the electorate. And clearly he's very good at it. You might not like him, but he's been prime minister for a long time. He must have had periods of great popularity, or certainly enough to get elected. And that moon in Aries was picking up on Canada's Neptune rising in Aries. So maybe you could say that he was able to fool Canada. I don't know. And that moon is opposition Uranus. And so his Uranus is on Canada's descendant. And in a national chart, the descendant represents foreign relations. It's how who you deal with, your enemies, friends, alliances, and so forth. And so the fact that he's got Uranus on his seventh house means that something about him has completely upended Canada's foreign relations and so forth. If you're Canadian, I'm sure you know far more about this than me. I'm just trying to point out the astrology. So Uranus is, if we think what he's done, I suppose you've got Canada's relationship with China, which has gone all over the place, as far as I know. Sometimes under Trudeau. I'm not going to comment on it because I don't really know much about it. But if you're Canadian, you can tell me in the comments. Then, of course, Canada's relationship with Russia has completely collapsed. Obviously, its relationship with Ukraine, say no more. What else? India. Canada's just fallen out with India because Trudeau said something really unfortunate in terms of someone was murdered in Canada. I think a Sikh was murdered in Canada, and Trudeau said something blaming the Indian government, and so he upset the Indians. India is a big country, important country, growing country of growing influence. You don't want to say that kind of stuff. So I think he's been unfortunate for Canada's foreign policy. Still, he's got the sun. He's got the sun on quite close to Canada's midheaven. That helps if he wants to be president. When you look at the midheaven, the 10th house in a national chart, that tells you something about your political leaders. And so the fact that Trudeau has his sun at 3 Capricorn really makes it easier for him to become Canadian Prime Minister. So those are a few thoughts about Trudeau and Canada. But possibly the most disturbing relationship that Canada has to deal with is its relationship with Ukraine. So what I wanted to do was compare Ukraine's chart with Canada's chart. So this is Ukraine's chart. Looked at it before. Some controversy about whether it's 5:31 p.m. or 6 p.m. on August the 24th, 1991. So that's Ukraine's chart. Notice Ukraine has an ascendant of 842 Capricorn, Uranus rising that Ukraine has. And so if we look at, if we put Canada's chart in the middle and we put Ukraine's chart at the top, we can see that Ukraine's Uranus ascendant, because Ukraine has Uranus ascendant 842 Capricorn, Uranus 1006 Capricorn, and it's right on Canada's midheaven. Midheaven is about the direction of the country, not just the government of the country. Although even with the government of the country, you have got a deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, whose mother was Ukrainian, who is complete Iranian partisan. Partisan as in party supporter, a supporter of Ukraine. Very close to the centre of government. And this does seem to be an issue. But somehow the aspirations of Canada have been caught by the Ukrainian national chart, and so Canada is now finding itself moving in the direction of Ukraine, where Ukraine wants, with that Uranus, with Ukraine's Uranus ascendant right on Canada's midheaven. So I do think that's a bit of a problem. Might also point out that Canada's Mars in Virgo, Mars is Virgo, is your armed forces. It's fairly close to Ukraine's Sun in Virgo. Ukraine Sun 056 Virgo. So there's something about the basic nature of Ukraine which is attracting Canada's military attention. Canada putting money into supporting Ukraine militarily, and a lot of the sort of the aggression of Canada is being focused on supporting Ukraine. Yes, there is, I think, quite a powerful link between the Canada chart and the Ukraine chart. One other chart I want to consider is that of Stepan Bandera. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that there in parts of Canada actual statues of Bandera have been put up. I suppose it doesn't help that after the Second World War, is it 800 veterans of the SS Galicia Regiment went to Canada, and I suppose they've taken root and they've sort of influenced their environment and influenced people's the way Canada might be thinking. Yes, so you've got statues of I think I've heard that. I don't know. But so Stepan Bandera, Ukrainian nationalist, responsible, anti-Semitic. He was kind of responsible for example, I think attacks and killings of the Jewish population, also for massacres of the Poles. I think something like 100,000 Poles were killed in a massacre orchestrated by the followers of Stepan Bandera. So Stepan Bandera, nationalist, really nasty piece of work. Not the kind of person you want to emulate, but Stepan Bandera's sun was at 10 Capricorn. So going back to Canada's chart, there's its midheaven at 8-4 Capricorn. So in a way, the sort of personality and memory of Stepan Bandera, it's kind of hitting Canada. Now I want to just finish with one thing, just for your amusement, something for you. I don't say amusement, but there's one sort of bonus comparison I wanted to make. This is a chart of Heinrich Himmler. I mean, I looked at Heinrich Himmler's chart 2 days ago, and I pointed out that Heinrich Himmler had an opposition between Saturn and Neptune. Saturn at 29 Capricorn, Neptune at 29 Gemini. We often wonder, what does it mean to have a Saturn-Neptune opposition? I've got an exact Saturn-Neptune square. I suggested that with Heinrich Himmler, it may be about Neptune was his fantasy, and Saturn was trying to bring that fantasy down to earth. So that's Heinrich Himmler's Saturn-Neptune opposition. So how does it work? Well, Justin Trudeau also has a Saturn-Neptune opposition. It's in sort of opposite signs to Heinrich Himmler. So if you say Heinrich Himmler had his Saturn at 29 Sagittarius, Neptune at 29 Gemini, with Justin Trudeau's chart, we've got Neptune in Sagittarius, Saturn in Gemini. So what does that mean? Justin Trudeau's Saturn Neptune opposition. So that's something to think about. Are there any ways in which that Saturn Neptune opposition is working in a similar way to Justin Trudeau, between, when we do a comparison between Justin Trudeau and Heinrich Himmler? I don't know. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Canada. I hope you found that interesting. Apologies for my ignorance about Canada, but as I said, I've never been to the country. Anyway, I will talk to you again tomorrow.